in the Workplace Toolkit. I'm very glad to have you all here. We've already basically giving an introduction, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We have two RAs here, and it's me, and then we all planned as how we would like to have a mental health toolkit as it was the regional priority for the Americas and for Europe, and even obviously generally for SCOF as well. The idea of the mental health toolkit is to provide NMOs with a very ground basis as to what they can do, or as to the practical steps that they can take to make their NMO or their organization mental health friendly. So I'm just going to move to introductions, and then I can come back to proceeding with the idea and how we can proceed with it. Juanse, do you want to introduce yourself first? Your name, where you're from, your position, and what are you doing right now?
Hey guys, so nice to meet you. My name is Juanse. I'm from Colombia, from the Regional Assistant for the Americas, and well, really glad to start this toolkit with it.
And what are you doing right now?
Like right now?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just waking up because it's 8 a.m. in the morning. So yeah.
Thank you. Mustafa, would you like to go next?
Okay, I'm Mustafa from Egypt. I'm LPO in one of LCs of IFMC Egypt, and I am the national coordinator of mental health project in IFMC Egypt. I was studying cardiology before this meeting. I think that's all I did since I woke up today.
Do you have an exam?
Yeah, I have a cardiology exam in 2 or 3 weeks from now.
Best of luck. Magic?
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, I'm Maciej Bukerski. I'm a SCOF Regional Assistant for Europe. And now I'm actually in Jordan doing my Skopje exchange. And basically before this call, I was in the hospital in the radiology department, and it was pretty interesting.
Thank you. So my name is Nashwa. I'm the SCOF director for this term. I'm from Pakistan. I'm currently eating because I forgot to eat lunch. But it's 6 p.m. here, so it's not as early as Juanse. So now I'm going to dig in. Well, Maciej, I hope you're taking the minutes. Okay, so we're done with the introductions. Now the second thing, so now we're done with the personal introductions. I'm going to move to the introduction for the mental health toolkit. So we already started a bit as to the purpose of this toolkit. So the idea or the inspiration was also taken from a toolkit which was made by IFMS on social accountability. We'll just go over it together as well after in the agenda. But yeah, so the idea is giving the NMOs a very solid basis as to how they can make their NMO mentally healthy. And the idea of how it started was last year. IFMSA started Mental Health Watch, which was basically that one of the team officials used to carry out a mental health watch for all the other team officials, and as a judgment as to how their stress levels are, etc., etc. So it was recorded over a period of time, and if they ever needed help, then they could talk to someone. It was not something which was very well established, or a system which was very clear, but it was just an initiative in that way. So the idea is to build up upon it, and then a lot of presidents from NMOs were very interested in how this was and how we could take it. So Juanse, Maciej, and I had the idea to make it more concrete and established, and something which is very clear. I'm starting. So the way we've had a call before. So just to give you a little bit of the update of as to what our thinking was, it was basically to come up with an outline and just to search as much as we can and read up as much as we can on stuff, and then come up with the toolkit which is concrete and applicable, because a lot of resources that you will read are for mental health in the workplace in itself, are for big organizations or for corporations, which of course do not apply to NMOs and NGOs like us. So if anyone has any questions or queries, please open your microphone and let me know at any point. Other than that, I'm just going to go into the outline which I could think of doing the little research I did, and then we can open the floor for discussion. So the first thing that we'll do, we'll come up with the outline, and then we'll discuss as to what we think can be added, cannot be added, and then the fourth thing will be we can move on to the samples and task description. Task division. Does anyone have any questions, queries, or comments? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. So if you move down to the second page of the minutes, you can see problem statement, and then it says organizational setting, etc., etc. Is everyone there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So basically the idea. I'm sorry if you hear me.
I dropped out from the call for like 1 minute, so maybe I didn't take minutes of some part.
That's okay. So Marshak, just to catch you up, we're just gonna go over the outline, which is on the second page, and then we're just gonna discuss amongst ourselves as to what can be added, etc., and then how to proceed. Not only discuss about the outline, but also the procedure. Outline plus proceed, right? Outline plus procedure, and then we're gonna move on to a sample and task division. Okay, so on the second page, there's an outline presentation which is made by me, so we can always discuss, etc. The first thing which I think that can be added in the toolkit is the problem statement, which is specific to us as medical students, because not only are we medical students, so which puts a very big burden and makes us a vulnerable group among mental health, for mental health issues, but also we're working for a volunteer organization. Anyone who's working in IFMSA and at the NMO level or at the international level is a volunteer in that sense. So this makes us vulnerable twice over for mental health issues. So that is the first thing which we need to establish a problem statement as to why are we making the toolkit. So that was the problem statement. And then
Nishwa, can I have an input at this point?
Yeah.
So I have an idea that we might actually base our problem statement on some kind of research that we could conduct among our members, because I think in order to prepare the most adapted toolkit to our organization, we could ask our members about the issue of the mental health environment in their own animals. So, for example, what do they recognize as the bad practices, or how do they observe over the years the mental health of the volunteers of the organization, and so on and so on. So we could have more, directed the problem statement to IFMSA setting.
So we could have a survey among,
I think that our members have a lot of to say in these terms. I know that from my organization that was always an issue, and we can at least in this problem statement indicate the areas that need to be improved.
See, what I was thinking was that because from my side, this toolkit is not us proposing solutions directly which can be applicable to NMOs, but empowering NMOs to do it by themselves. So in the sense that because each NMO will be very different from each other, right? And each NMO functions differently. Each NMO's members are different in their study group, in their exam time, in their things like that. So this is something which I'll discuss in the outline, was to what if we're able to make a survey for the NMOs so that they can spread it among their members, and they can come up with policies within their NMOs rather than us doing the survey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's definitely what I have had in mind. I was just to add to the comment. I was attending some kind of a panel discussion in the meeting in Strasbourg, and there was the guy from another NGO, youth-led or NGO, and they kind of did the same thing, that they gathered the opinion, the experience, the ideas from the members of the organizations. How do they perceive the mental health and their environment in their own setting? And this was really impactful in the terms that a lot of NGOs have different working style, different they gather different members with different backgrounds and so on. And we, of course, acknowledge that we have mostly medical students in the IFMSA, but this comes with certain characteristics. So, as you said, of course, the exams, different, I don't know, countries and so on, culture and so on and so on. But I think there is something more like overarching in the NMOs that goes beyond the culture, goes beyond the exams specificity and so on, that IFMSA has in common. So I don't know, that's an idea that I have. I think that's a good idea because it really worked in the organization that it was a small kind of an NGO organization from Ireland. So that was very empowering in their own structure.
Perfect. So I'm adding it as a survey, and then we can decide what's the best way to do the survey within the NMOs, or if we as IFMSA should conduct it. Okay, thank you. So the problem statement is so we could research among our members. So coming back to it, the problem statement, firstly, we need to realize that we're medical students and etc. etc. We can also medical students and volunteers. And we can also use this as, and we can also put in some researches here as just as a reference, etc., which link medical students to mental health, or which leads volunteer, like, people volunteering, or people who have less time on their hands, etc., or have a heavy workload with mental health issues. So that's a good ground basis for us. But can you please take minutes here? Thank you. So that's the idea of the problem statement. And then the second thing was organizational settings. So for organization setting, because we're trying to tailor it very specifically to NMOs, then the points which came to my head while reading was, the first thing was to make a case for mental health. The first thing is to realize that there's a problem, but the second thing is to have a case for mental health, saying why an organization, even apart from the fact that this is the right thing to do, would benefit from looking after the mental health of their workers, in the sense, or of their members, in the sense that mental health is very tangibly linked to productivity, and even as to an extent that a lot of researches by WHO, by the World Economic Forum, at the World Economic Forum, which were presented, do present that there's a lot of economic burden which is linked to organizations. Of course, it's for organizations and corporations which are based on money, etc., or like non-volunteer organizations. But even for us, if we as NMOs want a good productivity or want increased results, then mental health is something which we need to focus on, firstly because it's the right thing to do, secondly because it's tangibly related to our productivity. The third thing was stigma and perceptions. So this is where we can use researchers, like more backed up and detailed researchers, as to how in each NMOs we need to firstly talk about the stigma and the perceptions even before we take any stance, or before we take, not stance, but before we take any motive or any initiative, because any initiative that you take needs to be practiced in the NMO's environment, and then stigma and perception become very important there. So for stigma and perception, it could be us giving them a survey as to what is the current perception or what is the current stigma that they think is associated, firstly in their working environments, and secondly, of course, it is upon the NMO if they want to take it beyond their NMO to workplace, to medical students, etc. The second thing is practices. So these are important work. These are the work-related factors. So these practices are something which are, again, researches which have been done over very in-depth researches by professionals, etc., which show what are the work-related factors which are tangibly related to mental health. So for instance, I think I wrote it down everywhere. If you can give me a minute. So things like, for instance, a sense of autonomy is something which is related to, which is a work-related factor. So if the members think that they do not have a good sense of autonomy and authority, then that is a bad workplace practice for mental health issues. The next thing which comes to my head is, which are of course all researchers, rewards, like if the rewards or if the transparency is low, or if there is less involvement of members in decision making, then that also leads to decreased mental health or decreased satisfaction in jobs. So these are the work-related factors which are tangibly related to mental health. And of course, in each NMO or any organization, we can always give them pointers as to how they can increase it. For instance, how can you include members in decision-making process? How can you have more transparency, for instance, for selection or making criteria, or having more communication, more open communication? So these are the things which are mentally health friendly factors. Mentally health friendly practices which can be done. The next thing is healthy environment, and then healthy environment goes twofold. The first thing is practices such as meditation, and because recently in the last GA in Egypt, we tried to have morning, like one of the NMOs, I think it was them, so Austria, who tried to hookah sessions every morning, and then even having meditation breaks, etc., which a lot of organizations have started doing. But also, secondly, a general environment, which is linked to the second point of stigma and perception. That how can you in other ways promote a health environment, such as talking amongst members, such as taking an initiative to have a more friendly, open environment, a more inclusive environment, which is also related to mental health. And then, of course, wherever we do this, we can also quote researchers, or at least know what we're proposing here. The next point in organizational settings is support. So this is something where the organization takes an active role at the end, such as assessment of a mental health, like assessment through mental health watch, which is something that we do in FMS, but of course we do it at a very primary level and not something which is developed enough. But we can always look as to having a more developed and research backed up. I think Maciek and Fonse did do some research and had some proposals on it, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, we did the primary stage of the research. I mean, we actually developed the mental health form, the new form for the mental health watch.
Maciek, I can't hear you.
Hello? Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Let's say sensitive in terms of the burnout syndrome. Do you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, more sensitive in terms of burnout syndrome and general minor psychiatric disorders such as an anxiety disorder, depression episodes, and so on. And we prepared some first guideline how to interpret the results, but we stopped the working. Like we had the last stage in our mind, which is the solutions, how support more individual the person who has some first signs of mental health compromise. So, but I think that's an idea to develop, and definitely worth to try.
Perfect. Can one of you please add it here, like in the support thing, a link to it?
I will look for it.
Yeah, take your time. Thank you. And the last thing is reaching out, and this reaching out is something again which is very general in the sense that reaching out, which is again very, very general but very specific to other different NMOs, is that if you can as an NMO have a system, for instance, if you have any associated hospital where you have a psychiatric a psychologist, etc., which you can link them to, so they have a place to go. Mostly it's easier for corporations which are non-volunteer to have these services, because there's obviously an investment that goes in and money for hiring, etc. For NMOs, we might or might not, so that's a two-way thing for that, to have services available. But the second and the good thing is that we're medical students, and we work in hospitals, etc. So it can be good for us to probably somehow lobby, not only in our universities but also for our NMO somewhere. For instance, if it's a local council, then we can have the hospital affiliated, or lobby for having services. Or it's not even about having services, but it's about having a clear path for them to know if there's an intervention needed, then where can they seek help in that state. So the first thing is done, which is about organizational settings. The second thing is examples of other companies, extended methodologies plus research. So this is something which is very interesting, and I'm going to share a beautiful document which Juanse made with resources. Here, so I was reading the second resource on it, and they're really good, the resources here, and they're very, very relevant. So I mean, you can open the resources, you don't necessarily need to open the specific document because it's very lengthy, but I will give you a concise thing here. So examples of other countries include, so there are a lot of companies. It includes, because there are very big corporations who have started working on mental health of their employees, and then they're doing stuff. For instance, I think it was the Bank of England or Bank of Scotland, which started handing out surveys or questionnaires. And then there is the World Economic Forum. There were a couple of organizations and corporations which came together, and they made a whole and they made a survey for different organizations to assess as to what they think is their level of mental health friendliness, etc. So this is something which can be our second point. And of course, while we're doing this, then there are a couple of researchers which we'll see along the way as well. When I talk about researchers, because I've been talking consistently about it, I don't necessarily mean that we have to add on researchers a lot, but it's just for us to realize where the link exists, and obviously to make it more evidence-based rather than just the way we feel, or the way only upon the opinions or the ideas. So it's also, number one, it's research-based. Number two, it's done in that sense. Okay, and then Matrix has also added a mental health watch for LIMSA, which is something which you can definitely go over.
I added also to the document the link to the LIMSA, Lithuanian Medical Students Association mentor and mental health watch system, which is another idea, another approach how to care about the mental health of the members among the association. And I think it's really interesting idea, very simple in the terms of the whole system, but I guess very powerful, and there's like a clear support system which connects like 3-4 people among the organization and proved to work in the LIMSA.
Perfect, thank you very much. That's great. We have another example from an NMO amongst ourselves, so that's more tailored. And then I just added something which came to my mind, which is team officials and members. So of course there can be mental health watches, it can be specific to team officials, and then it could be for members if you want to have it. Because obviously each NMO has national members and local members, etc., etc. So probably for us to propose, not tailor it for them because it's their work to tailor it, and then we're just the empowering or the facilitating tool here, but to give them idea as to how they can link it together. And the last thing is training plus and resources, because if you guys look at everything, because this is for a lot of NMOs, which I can say, and I am generalizing here a bit, it will be a new initiative to take. And whenever there's a new initiative which is coming in, then a lot of training and a lot of resources need to be provided for everyone, or to prime the NMO or any organization to work in a specific sense. So it will be upon us to either provide them with training, which is also available in that there are some resources which in Juan's document which have a lot of trainings already available, and then yeah, and then we can also have some resources, etc. Additional. So the last two things, which were, so these were the main prime three things, and then we have presentation, advocacy, and scoring tool. So what this is, we'll have to move to the next agenda point, which is I'm sorry, I'm going to move the sample before to the discussion so that we can have it. So there's a sample which says which there's a link. Can everyone link it? It's ifmsa.org/social accountability. It's point number 3 discussion. Is everyone there? Does anyone have a difficulty reaching to that webpage?
I am.
Perfect. Okay, so if you guys see that this is one of the pages, this is one of the toolkits that was made by FMSA, which was social accountability, and then they have an associated video, and then they have an assessment form, PowerPoint presentation, give a training, get the presentation, lobby with your medical school, lobby with your association, social media campaign, and student declaration. So the idea, which would be really cool for us to have, is to have something similar in the sense that firstly, the assessment tool or the assessment form is actually a part of the toolkit itself. So it gives you a good assessment tool as to what can you do, how can you assess how mentally friendly your organization is from, and this is just something that we need to come up from, like with research, with backed up research, we can come up with an assessment tool ourselves as to what are the factors. For instance, just going over or giving you a sample of the outline presentation we have, then it could be, for instance, how have you ever, no wait, does your NMO have any practices for mentally healthy environment, including yoga, yes or no, and then we can mark them. The second thing could be, do you have a mental health watch, 1 to 10? Do you have, how much are the members, not members or team officials, etc., or members even involved in the decision-making process? How much they're given, etc., etc. So it's so we can, from the evidence-based things that we've done, we can have a link or give them an assessment tool so they can assess how mentally healthy their organization is. So if you open the toolkit, we do have there's a good it's a very short toolkit, which I particularly like about it, and probably this is something which we can strive for as well. So it's something that everyone can read and implement, and is simple. So it says, what is social accountability? So we can start with what is mental health in the workplace, why is it important, and that we can add the mental health. We can add the problem statement in the mental health, etc. Why this toolkit as to why we're doing this, and then how can we assess, here it says social accountability, so we can go, how do you assess mental health? And there is the points where we break down the different components we talked about, and then to come up with an assessment toolkit. And then the last thing is how to take action. So this is the general idea. And then when we talk about things such as giving a training, etc., and then if you go with the social media campaign, there are different infographics. So this is something which can also be a part of our toolkit for mental health, or at least, I mean, not, it does not necessarily have to be a part of the tool, but when we release it or whenever we are developing it more, then we can provide NMOs with trainings or with ready-made presentations that they use in their national member organizations to start this. So this will also, and then if you look at infographics, so this is why I just want to discuss if there's anyone who's good with infographics, etc. We can also make infographics which can be used by all of us towards mental health, like, you know, mental health friendly organization. And then the infographics can also have facts, etc. So this is the end of my explanation of the idea that we three had and a bit of what I came over. Now I'm going to open the floor to discussion and then we can move ahead. So please feel free to unmute your microphones and it can be discussion, can be query, comment, anything. And Machik, I'll take the minutes at the end for the discussion as well.
Okay, so regarding the toolkit, like the part of the practices and the healthy environment, yes, I was actually thinking about it when I was like when I was having my idea of a toolkit, because what I think that we should like maybe give to the well to the people that are going to use it is okay, like how to evaluate my organization or my team or my institution, and then how to well approach those problems, right? So something really practical that I found in a document that is made by the Mental Health Foundation is well, there are many tools that maybe we could use like specifically for that. For example, to maybe recognize the related factors. There is such a checklist for the employers to check mark in order to see, look, okay, is there being like maybe I don't know, a healthy environment, like the orders are being given in the right way, you know. So I think that we can we could use that checklist in this point. And as for the healthy environment, there are also like very good like advices and good practical points and evidence based in this document of the Mental Health Foundation, which actually states like well, advice not only for individuals but also for the co-workers. So I think that that also maybe could be like in this point of the healthy environment. And there's another document that I found that it was really interesting, was that, okay, as you said, we're not actually giving like the specific a solution to the problem because every single NMO or every single like team that is going to apply this is very different, and they have different problems and different situations. So I think that like we could give them like the tool or the process that they could follow in order to maybe well, like reach the mental health environment, you know. So there's another document made by the World Health Organization that actually just states the whole process that an organization should do in order to reach mental health mentally health environment. So yeah, it states about like how to mobilize, how to assemble, like how to assess, how to prioritize, plan to do and evaluate. So I think it's really interesting because it is really like practical and something that can be used. And well, I just thinking about many ideas regarding this.
Perfect. Juanse, when you get time, can you link is it one of the resources in the resource doc?
Yes, one of them is in the document, and the other one I found it yesterday.
Where is the WHO one? Is it the?
Okay, I'm gonna link it.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Mustafa Magic?
Yeah, I have a question that the checklist we are trying to use to evaluate the mental health in the environment or the current state of mental health for members in our NMOs are facing a problem that we are medical students and we are one of the vulnerable group that we have more anxiety and depression or something, you know, that our mental health isn't so good. One of the last papers said that from 9% to 40% of medical students are suffering from depression and anxiety and etc. So we have to edit these checklists and the the checklist we will use to evaluate the mental health status for our members and NMOs to exclude the factors are are facing us from the study, and something like that, to know that their mental health status are exclusively from the environment and the workplace, not from their study or something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's actually very, very smart. Um, I really like this idea that they're twofolds. And the NMO skin, which I just said that there are two things. Number one, because we're medical students, we're number one vulnerable in ourselves because of that, and of course there are other personal factors as well. Because there are personal factors, for instance, which are outside the NMO in your life, and then the last one is the work related ones which we can do. So we can tailor it according to that. And then also, I think we can also discuss briefly, because we might not have resources as much, but if a workplace environment can help out with, I mean, not help out, but make the person themselves realize where their stress or etc. is coming from. So is it workplace, is it personal, is it studies related, etc. So I really like this point, to make them more exclusive rather than inclusive. Magic?
Yes, I will go with the same in the same direction of the discussion. Basically, I would like to also narrow the examples of the other companies' practices to the youth-led NGO organizations in general. I'm assuming that there are a lot of materials regarding that. And basically, the whole objective to do that is that we should always differentiate the practices that are implemented at the organizations that the workers are being paid, and their own professional career, and they have no other obligations than that, because it's a completely different, completely different environment. And in the volunteering organizations, there is different specifics of the relationships between the people, between the responsibilities, how people perceive them, and it's more likely that the person who took some responsibility is feeling even more compromised, because they have other obligations which are of highest priority, such as a university or whatever. So so I would go into the direction to even more specify this toolkit towards the and like the youth organizations, to ensure that our members and our internal structures will benefit the most. Because the examples that I have found in this, that one of the links that I think it's the 7 steps towards a mentally healthy organization by WHO, is it, or something? It's more general, and it's more about the other companies, like the workers that are being paid companies and their examples. And of course, those organizations, they have certain funds to allocate in terms of the more mentally inclusive environment. And let's say that volunteering organizations, they do not have it. So we have to really specify that and try to find other solutions and other practices that could have an impact in our structures.
Perfect. So I cannot agree more. Absolutely. So okay. So now what I'm gonna do is there anything else that someone wants to say? Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What did just Magic said?
Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't hear what Magic said.
I don't know if I should repeat everything.
I can
just as some.
Just
summarize.
just a brief summary is that we should specify the resources, the research things that we use in this toolkit to youth-led organizations. And the best way, it could be the students' organizations, just because it may be more accurate and more impactful for our organizations, for IFMSA, because some of the examples for the good mentally practices are not achievable by the volunteering organizations. Firstly, because of the lack of the funds for it, and secondly, because we have different, completely different characteristics in terms of the people who are working in the structures. In the way that they have different obligations, they have different responsibilities of higher priorities for the people who are the volunteers, and it's usually considered as an additional activity that they do alongside the studies, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do agree. That's like my point I wanted to say, just that like those resources are very general, and we know that our federation we need to like to tailor. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that well, some of the recommendations and the solutions that they give are also like very general, and we need to give like concrete things. For example, if they say, okay, do mindfulness, I think that we should like provide a mindfulness, I don't know, like practice for the animals, so that it can be an actual toolkit, and they can just like take concrete things to apply into their animals.
Can you guys give me 1 second? Okay, so basically, I completely agree, and I think that's the reason why we're going over like more than 10 resources, very long ones, and then once we divide the work, then we'll go over more resources. So the more we read, the more we can get more ideas, and then we can, because of course that's why we're making a toolkit, and we're just not giving them a folder full of these resources, because we really want it to be more concrete, specific, concentrated towards what we're doing. So I'm glad that we're on the same page regarding the general ideas, etc., what we need to do. Now I want to discuss as to the procedure, that the way we should proceed in making this toolkit, etc. One thing which needs to be remembered is the initial idea is to complete this toolkit before the August meeting, which is only in 2 weeks, which is kind of a challenge. But we can see if we are able to at least come up with a good draft, and I can get someone to work on the publications as fast as they can. If they can't, then I'll work on the publications in a day or so. So we can start at least with this, and then in the August meeting, we also want to have one session where we can preach everything which we've said in this, so we can have as many animal representatives as we can, etc., etc. Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence because your voice wasn't clear?
Yeah. So the last sentence was that we're also gonna have one session in the General Assembly in the August meeting, specific to this manual, which is like there's a session which says mental health in the workplace, and we're gonna invite all the NMOs who wants to send at least one of their members, so that we can in that session also preach what we have in the toolkit as a session, and then they can take it home, etc. Okay, so now I'm just going to open the floor for discussion as to how to proceed with this, but just going to propose my idea first. I was thinking that we can right now come up with a general outline, which we already have to an extent, but we can like take a new page and then make the pillars, which we have, and then we can assign them to because we're 6 of us, yes. So do the 6 of us, and then each of us can work on specific pillars as to what they're interested in, and then at the end we can have a deadline, and then after the deadline we can all review all of them. And yes, so we can review all of it, and then we can send it, like once it's finalized, we can send it to publication, etc. So does anyone have any ideas as to what how you'd like to proceed, or is this fine?
Well, like the rough idea that I had is what I told you is that we could just divide the work into like how to evaluate, like okay, how does a person who is reading the toolkit evaluates the environment and all the risk factors and everything, and the other part would be just like the solutions that that person could take in order to have a mental health environment.
So, I'm sorry, can you repeat, because
Yeah, sorry. What I was thinking about was that, well, like the two big pillars of the toolkit would be like first, like the evaluation of what the person would be, assessing. For example, like what are the risk factors that might, for example,
Mm-hmm.
checklist that I told you, and well, maybe if we find other thing interesting to include, maybe we could include it. And the other pillar would be like how to give solutions to those problems. So, for example, well, I think it needs to be general.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea is that I think that we can just give in the pillar of solutions. So yeah, so specific recommendations, for example, like giving or like orders and
Honse, you're breaking up, by the way.
Okay, I'm changing position. Okay, so what I was saying is that, well, delivering like specific solutions, and also in that in that pillar would be like also like how to like to state like the process that I told you for a person who maybe wants to, or for example, like yeah, like the person who wants to follow the mental health in the workplace process that I told you. That would be really interesting. So I would think that those would be like the two pillars: the evaluation and the solution part of all the process.
That's perfect. I like this, but I think for the sake of being more, can we break this down more? Like we're just going to talk about it right now, and then we can break it down more, so we can have more specific things that people can work on.
Sure.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything? So, I think it will. Does anyone else have anything to say? Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is that I'm gonna start from the start, and this is just gonna be a round, like a discussion type. So I'm just gonna say one thing, and then we can discuss. Second thing we can discuss. So here we're just gonna come up with the outline of the. Firstly, we're wait. By the way, this is the last page of the minutes. I'm writing it on the fifth page of the minutes, and I'm just gonna write outline of the toolkit. So this is the proposed outline which we're going to we'll work on. And then I can say one thing as to what can be the start, and then we can all say things, and then we can divide as much as we can. Okay, so so in the toolkit, firstly, we'll always have a word welcome, like welcome message, which, and then we'll have content-wise, we will have mental health in the workplace. So in mental health in the workplace, the first thing we can do is come up with the no, what is it, as in the concept of mental health in the workplace, which would include just like probably half a page of what, like, how is workplace related to mental health. So for instance, just the things that we talk about, how a workplace really influences the mental health of people, etc. And then we can add in the problem statement, which we talked about, problem statement as to how we specifically as medical students. Should I be writing this down? Yes. So problem statement. One second. Problem statement. Yeah. So us as medical students plus volunteers. Okay. So Matrix just comment on something. So in the mental health in the workplace, we can have the concept of what mental health in the workplace is and the vision. I think that yes, definitely. We can add and the vision. So the vision, like, what would the vision be? The vision would be to have etc. etc. And then we can have the problem statement. What should we not have the problem statement before and then the vision? Like the concept, what it is, problem statement, and then
Yes.
the vision.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've divided the first way, mental health in the workplace, which would be the concept, what is mental health, the problem statement, we're medical students, we're volunteers, and the third thing is what is the vision that we're striving for. So it will also, of course, be the vision in the welcome message as well. Okay. The second thing will be Juanse, I'll come back to the survey because I'm just trying to plan if we can have this survey.
Okay, the general draft.
In the other sense or not, right? I'll just come back to this. Okay, so this can be the first thing, the mental health in the workplace. And then what else do we need to have? What is the concept? What is the from street? What's the vision? I think we can have a brief of the toolkit here as to the aim of the toolkit. So we can have the vision and we can have what this toolkit is. So again, this just needs to be very small where we can say this toolkit is not a solution for like a direct tangible solution for your NMO, but it's more of an empowerment, like, you know, it's a skill which we're trying to give to the NMOs, which they can use. No, something's wrong. Mental health in the workplace. So there's a welcome message, blah, 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 and the introduction of the contributors. Then we have mental health in the workplace as to the concept. What is mental health in the workplace? Why is it important? Okay, so I think in the concept we can also mention the risk factors, etc. So we don't have to repeat them. So what are the risk factors, etc.? The things that we just talked about in the organization. Then we can have what is the problem statement, where medical students, etc., etc. Then we'll say why is the toolkit? The toolkit, we have a vision of having a mental health, like mental health in the workplace, etc., etc. The NMOs to have this. Then what is this toolkit? This toolkit is a guide and it has tools which have etc., etc. And then we move on to, I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself in this way. Yeah, it has guidelines, tools. It is an empowering. It isn't. No, it isn't. Oh, it is not a solution, but tools facilitation. Okay, and then what we can come up with is so tools, and tools we can say assessment of mental health. So now that above we've in the concept of the mental health, now we've talked about the risk factors, etc. Here we can talk about the different. Wait, does anyone have any idea? Please feel free to speak while I'm trying to think. I think in the mental health workplace, we can also have the case for mental health in the concept.
I think.
Yes.
It's like the order.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think it might be a good idea that in the wait, one second, an image.
Okay, so that is like the summary of all steps of to an institution of how to proceed with the mentally health workplace. So like I think that maybe we could follow these, and in these like pillars or in these like steps, we could just like add what we have already talked about. So for example, it says, okay, mobilize. It is about, okay, just getting input from the members of the
Once you're making very good points, but I can't hear you.
sorry. the second step is about okay, creating a teamwork that is going to work for mental health within the organization. Then we have the assess, which is maybe we could include there like the checklist that I was telling you about before. Then we it talks about how prioritize. Then it talks about how to create a plan, and well, all that stuff. So I think that maybe this could help to how to well proceed.
I want to ask you something. In mobilization stands for to get the resources. I mean, the initial step. Can you explain what mobilize here stands for?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. Is it only me, or can?
Now I can't hear him also.
Okay. Answer? I cannot hear you. Okay. So until Mohansa comes back. So okay. So I think what we can do is assessment. So in the
Sorry.
toolkit, what is this? Yes. Hi.
Hey.
Mohansa, what I was asking was, can you explain a bit about mobilization? Like mobilize, what does that stand for?
Yeah, sorry, I just like explained everything and I didn't realize my internet crashed. Then the mobilization is about well, just gathering input from the members. It just recommends that before everything, just they would have to like gather like all the ideas that the workers in this case have about the mental health workplace. So they just say, okay, I'm not okay with this. I think that this should be changed, all this stuff, so that that could work as a base in order to follow the steps that that they recommend in the following steps there. So
okay.
Yeah.
So I think we can have this on the how to take. I mean, what's the actions? Like action, take action. So in taking action, we can have mobilization. So the mobilization will be the first thing would be gathering input from members. And here, I think we can develop. I'm pretty sure we can find examples. Develop surveys for NMOs to like when they want to take action. The first thing that they can do is they can use a survey for their own NMO as to there are two types of surveys. I think the first survey is as to their current perceptions, etc. And the second one is their current perceptions and the policy making of on mental health. So mental health. So firstly, I think they can have the survey on the current perception of mental health, etc. for them to use, and secondly, current perceptions. And yeah, so what policies do the thing? So for instance, there's always an idea in public health which we try to promote, that is that you do not necessarily have to work for the people, but you need to work with the people. So even if you're making a mental health policy for medical students, then I think medical students should be the ones who should be involved in them, and because no one better than them can provide input as to what them to be. So this is that, and then we can have wait, stigma, and then so mobilization has happened, and then assemble. What is this? Assemble people together. I mean, the workforce.
Yeah, the assembly, it is about okay, creating a work team, like deciding who or from the team that we are working in are going to be the persons in charge of like taking care about mental health. Okay, just to create a plan and everything what is ahead.
Perfect. And then there's a checklist, and then there's the assessment. So there are two things I think for plan. No, oh, this is confusing. So for mobilization, we have gathering of input for students, surveys, current perceptions, etc. Policy making on mental health assembly, we have a work team which we want to do assess. We have a checklist. I think we have assessment here as well.
Yeah, what's the difference between the assessment of mental health stigma and the assessment checklist in the take action point?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that we could include the first part of the assessment toolkit into the whole process, you know.
Yeah, but I think that stigma is that mental health evaluation, including stigma in it. I'm right?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, guys, let's do another thing. Let's take this out. I mean, let's not think of these steps for now, and let's just logically try to approach this. So let's assume that we four are an NMO, right? The first thing is that in the toolkit, firstly, we give them a concept of what is mental health, why is it important, what's the problem statement. The second thing is what is this toolkit, how is it going to help you, etc., etc. The third thing is, now what's the first thing that an NMO should know about mental health? That I think the first thing that they wouldn't, because I think the assessment of mental health in itself is important for them to know. And then here I think we can also come up with the tool for mental health mental health friendliness, or I mean obviously we need to come up with a better word, mental health friendliness, and then we can take out like specific actions, because there is a general assessment which needs to be done as to what are the character, for instance, what are the characteristics of a mentally healthy thing, a mentally healthy NMO, and then there's specific things that you need to do to achieve them. Does that make sense? Or do you think they go hand in hand?
I am a little bit confused. Like, should we actually mention the tools for mental health friendliness, as it's the toolkit that shouldn't be considered as a solution base, but rather as problem statement?
See, the thing is, there are two things. Firstly, there's coming up with this. For instance, there are two levels. Just giving an example for this. For instance, I run an organization, and you give me a toolkit. The toolkit is not for you to say, go ahead and, like, for instance, the toolkit is not here to tell me that all of your members should be given 10 days off before their exams, or it should not be bothered, etc., because that's something which is very specific to my NMO as to what there is. What this toolkit can do is say, you know what you can do in your organization, you can have a survey. In that survey you can ask the people as to what, for instance, in the survey can include what are the busiest times of your week, what is the most stressful period, etc. What do you think is required to make a mental health action, what helps you, what do you expect of this organization, etc. Like like Juanse said that, and then give them a tool to interpret that. So it's not, we're not telling NMOs, we're not giving them solutions to policies, we're giving them tools to make policies themselves. We are kind
Yes,
of giving them like the policy, I mean, basically we're not giving them policies, we're giving them tools to make policies. So the only thing
yeah.
so that's
Yes,
the idea.
I,
Okay,
I, I actually maybe think that we could also like.
Once I lost you.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I maybe think is that we shouldn't like maybe give solutions per se, but we could because yeah, the situation in every single NMO or institution or organization is going to be different, but we could just recommend actions to be taken. You know, for example, yeah, I don't know, maybe yeah, like you like to give a bunch of solutions, maybe, and maybe the person who is running the organization would pick the solutions that that person considers it can be like yeah right to carry out.
I think that we can propose some kind of a stepwise,
Yeah.
action. What are like the steps that should be taken in order to take care more about the mental health of the members in the way of very general but still specified to the NGO youth-led organization setting, and that could be maybe a good approach.
I think we can give some advice in case of there is a common common risk factors or common mental health status reasons or for this mental health status in all NMOs, and then give them the tool to or give them the surveys that they can apply to have some specified solution for each NMO.
I agree with that definitely, because there are but we are trying to empower them to have policies, but then there's also some things which are very basic. For instance, practices for mental health, as for instance the way we said meditation or a mental health watch, is just something which is a common denominator for everyone. So it's not, I mean, we cannot say that there's an NMO which should not practice mindfulness or meditation. So we have some common denominators and the others are just tools.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
okay, okay. So let's think about it. So we give an assessment toolkit, tools for mental health friendliness. So the first thing is we'll make an assessment toolkit, like an assessment tool right? So in the assessment tool, we will include all of the concept risk factors that we have, which is, for instance, autonomy of etc. Like, you know, autonomy, the thing we talked about, workplace environment, stigma, etc. So that will be an assessment, right? So this is the big thing where we can just make literally a table that says these are the factors which influence mental health according to research, and thus if your NMO does this, then this is good, right? So this is just something which we're making ourselves. This is not a checklist which we're taking from a specific resource, but collecting different resources and making one which we think an NMO assessment should be like, a toolkit should be like, right? Now, once we make an assessment toolkit, we can have an assessment toolkit which says, number one, this is the thing, then these are like, this is the goal, this is what we achieve for, etc. So this can be one nice assessment tool which everyone can use, like even before they start with this toolkit, they can just take it out and say, my NMO is this mentally health friendly because we practice this, and we don't practice this, right? The second thing is we can have taking action. So in taking action, these are the things where we give checklists for them to use. This assessment toolkit is for everyone to start with. The specific checklist is for them to distribute among their members as a tool, right? So for instance, in Mobilize, we have gathering input. So here now we'll go back to the assessment tool, because the assessment tool is the bigger idea, which I think everyone will have to contribute in from their part. So now we're going to take action. We're just going to start now brainstorming, right? So the first thing that we're taking about, let's even for a minute take out, like not consider the 7 steps, just to make it easier. And then once we can come up with a couple of things, and then we can put them in under subtopics. Okay, so the first thing is gathering input for members. So the first thing, 1 second, I'm just gonna leave comments here. Okay. So the first thing, what do you think is the first thing that needs to be done if an NMO wants to be mental health friendly? We've given them an assessment toolkit, right? So the first thing that they need to do is start the conversation, right? And commit to the idea. The second thing that they need to do is, once they need to go over the assessment toolkit, which we give them. I mean, the first thing they need to do is they need to come up with the assessment tool. They need to go over the assessment tool. Then they have to start the conversation, commit to the idea. The second thing they need to do is they need to start gathering input from the members. And this is for them to know the problem statement in their NMOs. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so in gathering input, the first thing that they need to gather input on, and this is something which we'll use for the checklists that are already there, problem statement and the things that we can add. So the first thing they need to do in gathering is what is the problem statement in their animals? In their animals for mental health. The second thing is what are the current perceptions? I mean, I think the problem statement does cover it, but general perception of mental health. So they know how to plan their trainings according to that. The next thing would be ideas for policies on mental health which their NMO should have. Does anyone have any other idea as to what input should one NMO take from their members on mental health?
I have a question that isn't current perception of mental health will be covered in the problem statement?
See, the thing is, it will be covered in the problem statement as a general thing for all NMOs, but this is something which is very specific for them to figure out what their perception of mental health might be. But no, you're right. But how will they use this? How will one NMO use their current perception of mental health? Yes, I think, for instance, in general, we will write about that the current perception of mental health is important as an assessment tool, etc. But it's important for them to realize, for instance, if there's an NMO where the current perception of mental health is that it is something which is not necessary. I mean, there are different perceptions of mental health as to some people thinking that it's a disease and it is disabling. Some people do view it as something which is a weakness of character, etc. As per se. So it is important for them to have this information to see what, the way we say testing the waters, and then their training can be tailored towards changing that perception. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
But no, you're right. I think. Do you guys think that just one standard presentation about perception and stigma associated? No.
Yes, actually, I think that in this point we could just like have a person who creates a form, let's say, to give them as a tool, so that they can just like apply into the NMOs, for example, you know. So like that form, for example, should have like everything what should be asked to the people belonging to that institution.
Yeah. Okay. So I must say you're right in that sense as well. That will be a part of the problem statement. So I think I'm going to add it in the problem statement as to the current perception of mental health, and then we can discuss with them the ideas and policies for mental health which should be in place. The next thing. So is everyone happy with the first two things?
Yeah, I have another question about stigma. I think stigma is a more significant problem regarding when we are talking about the mental disorders, not about mental health. So what will be the stigma when I'm talking about we are trying to make our workplace more mental health friendly?
Can you explain a bit that point? Because
Okay, stigma I think is a significant problem. When we are talking about the mental disorders, not about mental health. When there are a problem in perception of people to accept the people with schizophrenia or something like that. But when we are talking about we are trying to making our NMOs more mental health friendly and not make our volunteering work not a stress, not additional stressor for you as medical students, or the we are trying to making this stress relieving. You are here to add to yourself, not to take from your mental health. So what is the stigma we are facing in that point? We are evaluating the mental health status for the members or something like that. What are the stigma? How stigma will affect them or be a problem in that situation?
Okay, so I think the idea, like this idea of stigma, I really, really like your point, by the way. But I think it can be in two ways. Firstly, it is that because in this sense that we're starting the number one, when we come down to the level where we need to make the environment mentally health friendly. So even if the point where we said that we should be open to talk about mental health disorders. If, for instance, if I've been anxious for a very long time, or if I've been even depressed clinically, or I've been feeling sad for a very long time, am I able to speak it to my coworker easily? So even in NMOs, so that is where the stigma is attached. I do get that we're here trying to promote, what's the word? Well-being, rather than pointing out only on that. But then as a conclusion at the end, it could be that you will probably have people with mental health issues. And of course, mental health issues are not just clinical depression, except, I mean, it is in that sense, but there's always a threshold, or there's always a spectrum. So maybe stigma attached to that, just, I mean, and it does not have to be very, like, a lot of questions, but just like one question which indicates that, do you think there's a stigma attached, or do you think it can be taken away? So I do believe that perception is more important, but then just stigma, even on depression, etc. So which can lead to you assessing as to how you can create a mentally health friendly environment. Because from my work in volunteer organizations, I do believe that there is even a stigma attached to when someone says that they've not been mentally healthy for, like, or they say that they have a lot of stress for over a very long time, and judging that in the wrong sense of the matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it. But I think that it can be covered in the point of the current perception of mental health, that stigma is one of the current perceptions of mental health. Am I right?
Yeah, I just added it in that. That's why I did not write stigma here, but definitely current perception would be, so they can just be like one question on stigma under mental health. Okay, so is everyone happy with these things? The start the conversation, commit to the idea, gathering input.
Yes.
Okay, the next thing is, so gathering input from the members, the surveys of the current perceptions, policy making, etc. Then we have a working team. I think, and then we can come up with policies such as the practices here, and practices. And by the way, there are two types of practices which we talked about. The first one was work-related factors, and the second one was
environment, I think.
Yeah, mental health environment, and then okay, so take steps, start the conversation, commit to the idea, and then you can have here. We can also talk. Oops, where did I go? Yeah, here I think we can also come up with the idea as to how we need to have one mental health volunteer or a mental health watch, like at least team members who volunteer for this. And then we have gathering input surveys, etc. So we'll give them that. What's the problem statement? What are the ideas for the policy? So they need to be asked this. Then we have practices. The first practice is work-related factors. I think this is something which we're gonna take from here, from the from the concept, which will have the risk factors just mentioned, and the assessment toolkit. Then we can just have this. And then we can have mental. Okay, guys, what I'm thinking is something different. What if you think that we can give them okay, so we can have practices such as the work-related factors, and in work-related factors we have all the risk factors which will be identified above. The autonomy thing, the etc. So then we'll have to give them some examples rather than that, in the sense that how can they give more autonomy, how can they make it more transparent in the sense of giving transparency in the form of criterias, like explaining criterias for selection, etc. So everyone thinks everything's fair, and for sort of rewards. And I think the rewards thing is very important as to what Maciek said, using examples here, because we do not necessarily have monetary rewards, but we have other rewards, and how we can use that. And I think in practices is where we can also give in examples of other organizations and mostly youth-led, and then mental health, environment, etc. Then we have mental health, environment, meditation, and more other. Does anyone have any other parts from mental health, environment, how to make it more friendly?
Mindfulness, maybe.
Mindfulness, yes, mindfulness. I mean, I'm just writing these as examples, so anyone who will be given this particular part can go in and research as to what are the most backed up. So this is the things where we suggest practices and samples. Then we have, by the way, Juanse, do you think, and I think this might be the most trickiest part, as to how they can not only give them surveys for problem statement ideas, but also how to interpret those surveys? And then we have,
like, What do you mean with interpreting those surveys?
I don't know. I was just thinking, so if we have a survey where we said, I think whoever makes a survey can also add in, it does not need to be very specific, but whoever needs a survey also needs to interpret as to this question, not only give the survey, but also a little bit brief description of this. This is the survey, then how can we add on to the explanation, or how can we use the input that we get from these? Okay, and the next thing is having a mental health support, where we have mental health watch, and then we have the last thing is a reach. I'm sorry, these are not proper English words which we would use. Success, and then support, as to if they can have, and this is support for youth-led and medical student organizations, if we can have a place for reference for referring to mental health specialists. Okay, and then we have
excuse me for I think in this point of support we can add a point of how to approach a stakeholders like student hospitals or whatever to have a deal with, to refer for to refer the mentally diseased person or mentally ill health persons to these stakeholders as you know, a professional intervention.
Perfect. I also want to say one more thing. I think this we might want an expert for this as well, as to how can the mental health watch be linked to this intervention. Does that make sense? As in, for instance, if I'm having a mental health watch and I'm asking Juanse every month, are you how do you feel, etc., etc., and then in the results I see that he has, for instance, been under a lot of stress lately, and then he has symptoms of burnout, etc. Then how do we think that we can even approach the person himself and then get him support?
Yeah, I think that would be a really good way to do it.
I think it's inclusive in the mental approach the person as well. Okay, and then we have trainings and trainings and resources. Trainings and No, where would trainings come in? Do you think trainings would come in the start of the conversation? And I think from my side, this might be complete of the taking action part. Within the mental health, I think we should call this the whole mental health watch, because the mental health watch would be something which
Yeah.
is inclusive of all of this, right?
Yeah. Just because I was actually a little bit confused because yes.
And
Will we conduct them the trainings before gathering inputs from the members?
yeah, I mean, see, what I'm thinking is no. What I'm thinking is that we're like in our minds, we're thinking that a mental health watch is just the thing of where we said we give out the surveys to ask everyone, is everyone okay? But I think the mental health watch can be a concept which is from starting the conversation, gathering input, building in practices, and then the mental health watch, which we thought was just sending out forms, can be something named something different, such as assessment. And then even the support is also a part of the whole mental health watch. So this can be like one part of taking action, and then the other part of taking actions can be generally trainings and capacity building. Because of course the capacity building, because of course we're in NMO, so not necessarily can one, because and we have multiple, like, you know, for instance, I think IFMC Egypt is one of the more experienced NMOs who have a lot of LCs, etc. So it's very difficult for the national member organization, even outside their responsibilities, to have a mental health watch for the NMOs. So even for them to have trainings for these people, uh, having trainings for NMOs, etc. So capacity building, for instance, can be one part of what they can do as action. Does that make sense? Yes, no?
Yeah, we are still thinking and interpreting the your input.
Okay, yes, please take it.
Hey, did I miss something?
Yeah?
Did I miss something? My internet crashed.
No, no, we're just saying, we're just going over it ourselves and thinking if this is yeah, so I'll just go over what I was thinking. I was thinking of like take in the part where we say take action, then not only will we introduce the mental health watch as to step by step what they can do, but also capacity building. Um, as a part, like capacity building among their NMOs, except like among like within their NMOs as to how they can do it. And we're just thinking if there are any other, oops, sorry, if there are any other things um, which can be added in taking action.
Well, taking into consideration the toolkit on social accountability, I think then, well, that would be like maybe too much, but creating, I don't know, advices for advocacy, advocating in some places. Well,
You know what? That's exactly what I was thinking before that. That if this toolkit
sorry,
can
I don't listen.
okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I was thinking as well while I was looking at that toolkit, as to if we are also. I mean, I really like the social media part, because we can always, I mean, work towards a social media campaign as to what they can do. But about the advocacy part, this is what I was thinking. If we want to also make this toolkit an advocacy tool for mental health, but I think we're more of trying to do it within our NMOs, within a youth-led organization, rather than having mental health in the workplace generally.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, no, and I'm just, I mean, this is very open to discussion, because I'm thinking that if we want to make this make this toolkit also an advocacy tool for other, for instance, for medical institutes, for schools, and for universities, etc., then the outline should be completely different. Because then that would be more about medical studies and stuff.
Yeah, it would be very different. I agree
Yeah.
to that.
So I think this is just a tool for, let's just even say, for any youth organization. And I think it would be very cool if IFMSA, if this does turn out good, and if you can get it reviewed by one or two external, that this can be for just a toolkit for any youth-led organization as to how they can make it mental health friendly. Mustafa, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I have a question actually. I'm not actually quite sure about the, well, I have not clear the assessment tool that is before the take action.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is the assessment that Maciek was talking about, or what is this assessment about?
What assessment was Maciek talking about?
The one about like the survey.
Yeah, you know what? I think then that okay, so my idea of an assessment tool, why I'm kind of obsessed with this idea, as you can tell, is for them to for us to just filter all of these things which we're saying, which is the concept, the risk factors, the problem statement, no, not the problem statement, but like the risk factors, um the points of other things, such as if they've done this, is for them to have their two checklists or their two surveys which we're talking about, to be very clear. One is for the organization, the leading, like the organization head, let's say. I mean, I don't want to go into the hierarchy, but still, let's say it's for the person um, who's for the person who runs the organization or is responsible. So they can have a checklist as to these are the things which constitute a good mentally health organization. And then the other surveys or assessments are um, for the members as to what they think, etc. So one is just a general thing, and the other thing is the other thing. So if you can think of the assessment toolkit, I think you're right, should come at, I mean, I don't know if you said it, but should come at the end, because it will be a conclusion of everything. Or even what we can do is we can merge taking action and the assessment toolkit in one big table which says the components, which we've just divided the components, such as starting the conversation, such as gathering input. Does your NMO, or just your, I mean, because gathering input should be something that should be done every year with the turnover, right? And secondly, does your NMO have practices such as work related factors, or mental health, environment, healthy, etc.? So it's just to in the mental health watch idea, we're giving them the bigger idea and giving them examples. In the assessment toolkit, we're making it very concrete for them to mark themselves. So it's really, I mean, it's not one before the other, it's just them hand in hand.
So I think you are talking about two assessment tools, two surveys. One for the NMO, let's say NMO TO, asking them about their view about to what extent their NMO are mental health friendly, and the other for the members, asking them about their mental health status. Am I right?
No, I mean, yes. So in the way, the one is just for instance, if I'm the one who's responsible for my NMO, I will be the one who will take this assessment tool and see. The assessment tool here is the idea, or is the component that has all the components of a good mental health friendly organization, right? The
Okay.
other surveys are just surveys for them to take steps to make them. So the assessment tool includes other surveys in it as a sub part.
Okay.
So are we happy with this generally?
Yes.
Okay, and I just want to add one more thing in capacity building. So I think in capacity building, we also have to come up with not only samples of training, because I think trainings would come here. Yeah, we have one plan of training over here, and then on capacity building, like presentations, this is which is similar to the social accountability toolkit, like presentations for people to, and this is a presentation which I think we'll use in the GA as well, and we can give it as a sample to them, and then social media such as infographics. So this is also something that we can work with for the release of it. Now, is everyone happy, all three of us happy with this, with the outline? And then we can keep adding things, I mean, specific.
I have a final question for I don't remember your name. I'm sorry. Just what?
Once.
I have a question for him that what was his meaning for advocacy as advocating for other medical institution and other medical organization or non governmental organization to have a mental health friendly policy to apply in their organization, or advocate within IFMSA to have this to have a team to work in the to work on this policy in their NMO.
Once, did you get the question?
Oh, I think he can't hear us.
Yeah. But I can answer on his behalf, and I'm just messaging him as well. 1 second.
Okay.
So his idea was about advocacy to other NGOs, etc. To other, no, sorry, not other NGOs, like, and to even medical institutes to make them more mentally healthy. But the reason why is, and I think, do you think that we need an advocacy tool to advocate within IFMSA and NMOs? Because I think this toolkit is just, I mean, do you think we need to advocate to NMOs?
I think if the problem statement are showing to us that we have non convinced members or NMOs in the mental health friendly workplace, or they are, you know, the stigma is of high rate. I think we have to advocate for for this toolkit to, you know, to capacity to have the capacity building and so on. But you know, if I am not convinced with this toolkit or on this topic, I won't go with the assessment tools and the capacity building trainings, practice and so on. But if there is a problem statement showing that there is no low rate of stigma or low incidence of stigma, and all of the NMOs are convinced with the idea, I think we don't have to put an advocacy tool to it.
Yeah, I think. Do you think that? Do you think? But I think that we can only judge this after they've gone over the toolkit, right? I mean, as a post-assessment of this.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I really like the idea that I don't think that this toolkit is the end of it, because we really want to keep this going. So even in the next term, we can have a post-assessment of this, and in the assessment as to how many NMOs used it, how many of them did not use it, what can be changed, and even if we can come up with supplementary documents, etc., etc. Okay. So I think Mustafa, it's only you and me in the call, and I'm messaging Hunter. So do we think that we are happy generally with this outline?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hey. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Okay. So Mustafa, are you happy?
Yeah, I am happy too.
Okay. Just one thing is that maybe we could include like the assessment tool into the take action, and just like merge the mental health watch and an assessment just as a big assessment, I don't know, pillar.
Okay, perfect.
So that it can be like more clear.
Yeah. So in taking action, we'll do the assessment tool first. They need to take the assessment test so they know where their animal stands, and then they can start the mental health agenda. Is this fine now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then we have capacity building presentations plus trainings as to how they can take it to their NMOs level, and then we have a social media infographic, which can also be a dual purpose to convince the NMOs to do it, because I mean we don't only want, so this is a social media not only for infographics for mental health and workwear, but also the use of this toolkit so that we can convince animals to use this as they can, right? By the way, this is, and once this is just something that I said to Mustafa, that this is not, I mean, we just don't want to do this toolkit and get away with it. I mean, just say that we've done everything. We want to continue this as to with, like, post assessment of how many people use this toolkit. If they didn't, why did they not do it? If we can have a webinar, if there are more people interested in learning, etc., etc., right?
Yeah, sure. I agree to that.
So I think we have 10 minutes before the 2-hour mark for the OLM ends, and I think we've been very productive. Like, we've came up with a good outline. So now I'm going to ask everyone to volunteer as to the action points which they think they want to work on. And can you write, like, can you comment on them? So, like, the things that you think you want to work on.
Okay. Well, I think that we already have the mental health watch, right? Um, I would like to work on the assessment tool for the for
Once
the
I think in the mental health watch, we've added a lot of couple of steps, right? So I think even within the steps, there's a lot that can be done. For instance, the second part of gathering input from members, surveys and Quran perception, the problem statement, etc. So, like, anyone can also volunteer for how to
yeah
gather input, or etc. And then even for practices, like, one of us can volunteer for the work related factors, and then the mental health environment, and then someone can come up with the assessment, which is something I think which you and Matrix have worked on. So can you? I'm just gonna say add it here.
yeah. I think we can add it to the mental health watch.
Yeah. Okay. So an assessment toolkit is definitely. Mustafa, you can please feel free to volunteer, comment on things which you would like to take as well. Now, can I say I'm so excited this is happening. I'm so happy with the outline. It looks pretty.
Yes, it's going to be amazing.
Okay, I think I can volunteer in the support and the capacity building points.
Can you comment there with your name?
Sorry, what did you say again?
I'm saying whatever you think you can do. Can you comment with your name on them?
Okay, guys. So I'm sorry, I have to leave because I have something
Yeah.
now in some minutes. So I don't know. We haven't like set up talk about deadlines or something, but I'm going to check out like maybe if, the minutes and try to meet them. Okay.
Okay, Juan, just give me 1 minute. So
Yes.
I think we're just ending the call here. So what we're
Mhm.
doing right now is that we're gonna have what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna send an email to the people, like to Matrix, Milda, and like all 6 of us, and I'm gonna give them a deadline of probably tonight to go over to volunteer for their names. And once they've done, then we can come up with the first deadline, and then second deadline, and then last deadline. So we can always plan ahead of deadlines.
Okay.
Does that sound good to all?
Yes. Amazing.
Perfect. Okay, so I think this is the end of the call, and I will just go ahead with sending everyone the outline, asking them to volunteer, and then to decide on deadlines. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so very much, Mustafa and Juanse,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
and I'm very, very impressed and very happy. with this call. Okay, so I'm
Yes.
gonna stop.